Hi everyone. Welcome back to our channel where stories aren't just told, they're felt. If you're someone who believes in empathy, hope, and second chances, you're in the right place. What if the choice that cost you everything, missing the most important interview of your life, became the very decision that opened the door to a future beyond anything you dreamed? Today's story is about a young man who faced that moment and discovered that sometimes the storm you fear the most is the one that changes your life forever. Before we dive into the full story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more stories of resilience, unexpected miracles, and lives that find hope when it seems all but gone. Every click counts and every story matters. Now, let's begin. The rain hadn't stopped since midnight, but it wasn't the kind of drizzle that New Yorkers were used to shrugging off. It was the kind of storm that turned the streets into shallow rivers, the kind that made neon signs flicker and turned the glow of Harlem's streetlights into smeared halos on the wet pavement. The city felt heavier, quieter, like it was holding its breath for something no one could quite name. At 5:45 in the morning, when most people were still curled beneath their blankets, Jordan Hayes was tying his only silk tie in the reflection of his cracked bathroom mirror, rehearsing how to introduce himself for the most important interview of his life. He had no idea that in less than 4 hours his entire life would shift because of a single decision on a rain-slicked street, a decision that would cost him the opportunity he thought he needed most and lead him to something far greater than he could imagine. Jordan was only 22, but his eyes carried the weight of someone who had lived 2 lives already. The first, the one Harlem expected of him, was the life of dead-ends, minimum-wage jobs, broken promises, watching friends drift toward trouble because there wasn't enough hope to go around. The second was the one he was fighting for now, one interview away inside the gleaming lobby of Lockhart and Pierce Capital at the Empire State Building. It wasn't just a job. It was a ticket out for him for his mother, who had scrubbed hospital floors for 2 decades for his 12-year-old sister Jada, who still slept with the lights on because their neighborhood never truly quieted at night. The interview was supposed to be his escape, the proof that all those years of studying after double shifts, all the nights he came home with blistered hands and a burning back, actually meant something. The suit he wore was 2 years old, bought off a clearance rack and tailored by a neighbor who owed his mother a favor. His shoes were polished until the worn leather shone, and clipped to his cuffs were 2 tarnished silver cufflinks, his grandfather's sent to him in a small box wrapped in lavender tissue paper by his mother last week. For luck, her voicemail had said that morning, her voice hoarse from the night shift. And to remind you, you don't need to change to belong. Just keep your heart steady. Her words echoed in his head as he stepped out into the bitter air, clutching his old leather portfolio, the same one his father had used before he passed. It smelled faintly of oil and rain, like the garage his father once worked in, the memory steadying Jordan's nerves as he walked past the cracked sidewalks and shuttered storefronts. Near the bus stop, a cluster of men in heavy coats stared as he passed their steaming paper cups clutched like lifelines. Their gazes followed him, curious, but also sharp, weighted with judgment. To them, a young black man in a suit this early in Harlem wasn't going to a finance firm. Court, maybe. Trouble, probably. Not the 80th floor of the Empire State Building. Jordan felt the looks sink into him, but he didn't falter. He'd felt those eyes his entire life, eyes that measured him by where he was from before he could open his mouth. A voice pulled him out of his thoughts. "Storm's coming harder, son." A man croaked from under the awning of a bodega. Jordan glanced over and saw old Benny, a homeless veteran who often lingered by the corner wrapped in a tattered coat. The man's pale eyes studied him with something like knowing. "Storms test more than your shoes. They test your heart. Remember that." Jordan nodded politely and kept walking, though Benny's words sank deeper than he cared to admit. By the time Jordan reached 110th Street, the sky had turned a strange, bruised shade of gray, low clouds churning like they carried a warning. A sharp gust of wind nearly yanked the portfolio from his grip. Inside were his resumes, his notes, the case study he had spent 3 sleepless nights perfecting everything he needed to prove he wasn't just another name on a list. He clutched it tighter, his breath shallow. The Empire State Building's spire was barely visible through the foggy skyline, a needle piercing the clouds a promise and a threat all at once. Then the rain came harder. Not a downpour, but a curtain, cold, relentless, blinding. Within seconds, his coat was soaked, his hair plastered to his forehead, his shoes filling with water as he splashed through the flooded gutters. Yellow cabs flew past, none slowing their tires, hissing over puddles. Umbrellas flipped inside out. Commuters darted into coffee shops, leaving the streets nearly empty except for Jordan, who pressed forward head down each step, heavy with more than just rain. He checked his watch. 7:45. The interview was at 9. There was still time if he kept moving, still time if nothing else went wrong. But as the wind whipped colder and a strange, uneasy feeling coiled in his chest, he couldn't shake the thought that the storm wasn't just weather. It was a test, and before the morning ended, it would force him to make a choice no one would see coming. A choice that would break him or change him forever. By the time Jordan reached the corner of 42nd and Lexington, his legs ached, his breath steamed in the frigid air, and every inch of his clothes clung to him like a second skin. The storm had softened into a steady sheet of rain, but the city still felt raw and unsettled, the gutters overflowing, and the clouds hanging low as if the day itself was pressing down on him. He adjusted his tie, straightened the soaked lapels of his jacket, and told himself that no storm, not the rain, not the stares from strangers, not the gnawing ache in his gut, would keep him from walking into that skyscraper on time. Then he saw it. A sleek black sedan sat awkwardly at the edge of the street, its hazard lights blinking like distant flares in the gray haze. Its rear tire was flat-sagging into the puddle pooling beneath it, while beside the open trunk an older man struggled with a jack that kept slipping on the slick asphalt. He was tall but slightly stooped, his silver hair plastered to his head by the rain, his wrinkled hands fumbling as he tried to stabilize the equipment. His suit, dark and undoubtedly expensive, was wrinkled and soaked, and his umbrella had flipped inside out and now lay useless on the ground. Every movement he made was careful, but slow, the movements of someone not used to this kind of work, someone trying to fight both age and elements at once. Jordan slowed instinctively, his pulse quickening his mind instantly, pulling him in 2 directions. The Empire State Building loomed just a few blocks away, its spire piercing the low clouds like a beacon he could almost reach. The interview he had sacrificed everything for, the hours, the meals skipped to save for that suit. The late nights in his cramped apartment drilling financial models was waiting for him up there. If he helped this man even for 5 minutes, he might lose it all. In a city like New York, 5 minutes was enough to turn a dream into a closed door. His brain whispered the most practical truth. Walk away. Someone else will stop. The man's wealthy, he can call a service. You've worked too hard for this to throw it away now. He gripped his leather portfolio tighter, feeling the rain soak into its edges, and for a moment he almost kept walking. But then his mother's voice surfaced in his memory, soft but firm from years ago. You don't help people when it's convenient, Jordan. You help because that's what separates you from everyone else rushing past. The world will test you, and what you choose will tell you who you really are. Jordan froze at the crosswalk, watching as pedestrians rushed by with their umbrellas pulled low, not sparing the older man a single glance. A couple passed on the opposite side of the street. The woman's eyes flicked toward the stranded figure, but she kept walking, tugging her partner along. No one stopped. No one cared. The hazard lights kept blinking steady and cold, as if marking time against Jordan's pounding pulse. His breath came in short, visible bursts as he stepped off the curb. "Sir," he called out, his voice cutting through the rain. The older man looked up, startled, his pale blue eyes widening beneath the wet strands of his hair. "You shouldn't be out here struggling with that in this weather. Let me help." The man straightened slightly, gripping the jack with one shaky hand. "I thought I had it," he admitted, his voice carrying the faint rasp of someone used to command but now worn thin by frustration. "But the ground's uneven, and this jack, I haven't done this myself in 20 years. My driver's out sick." His tone carried a mix of pride and resignation, the sound of someone not accustomed to being this helpless. Jordan didn't hesitate. He set his portfolio carefully on the back seat of the sedan, shielding it as best he could from the rain, then peeled off his soaked jacket and laid it on the ground to kneel on. The cold asphalt bit into his knees as he repositioned the jack, securing it against the frame with the precision of someone who had done this 100 times before. Summers, working at his uncle's garage in Queens, came back in a rush. Rusted pickup trucks, old sedans, the rhythmic twist of a wrench until the bolts sang tight. "You know your way around a flat," the man observed, watching Jordan's steady movements, despite the rain streaming down his own face. There was something in his tone now, a trace of curiosity, as if this drenched young man kneeling in the gutter wasn't what he expected. Jordan gave a brief, humorless chuckle as he tightened the bolts. "My uncle wouldn't let me drive his old Chevy until I could swap a tire in under 10 minutes. Said it builds character." The man let out a low laugh, the sound faint but genuine despite the storm. Smart man. The clock in Jordan's mind ticked mercilessly, each second sliding away like water rushing down the curb. 7:55. 8. 8:02. Every moment spent here was a moment closer to losing the one shot he'd worked for. But he didn't rush. He tightened each bolt properly, making sure the spare sat flush and stable. By the time he lowered the jack, his hands were raw from the cold, his shirt sleeves streaked with grime, and his shoes heavy with water. He stood slowly, wiping his palms against his already ruined slacks. The older man straightened his back, creaking audibly as he extended a hand. "What's your name, son Jordan?" "Jordan Hayes," he replied, gripping the man's hand firmly despite the rain. The older man's grip was strong, surprisingly, so his pale blue eyes studying Jordan with a flicker of something unreadable, curiosity maybe, or recognition. "You headed somewhere important, Jordan." Jordan hesitated, glancing down the street toward the gleaming tower just blocks away. The lobby lights glowed faintly through the rain, a beacon of everything he thought his future could hold. He felt his jaw tighten, his chest heavy with the weight of what he was about to admit. "Yeah," he said, finally, his voice steady despite the storm. "The most important place I've ever needed to be." The man nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on Jordan for a moment before he gestured toward the sedan. "Then, don't let me keep you. Get in. I'll make sure you get there." Jordan blinked, caught off guard. "Are you sure you don't even know me?" The man's lips curved into the faintest suggestion of a smile. "I know enough. Let's get you out of this rain. You've already done enough standing still for one morning." Jordan climbed into the passenger seat, his body shaking slightly from the cold, the soaked leather of his portfolio pressed tight against his chest. As the car pulled away from the curb, gliding smoothly through the flooded streets toward Midtown, Jordan had no idea who the man beside him truly was, or how the choice he had just made, the one that might have cost him his only chance, was about to open a door to something far greater than he had ever imagined. The sleek black sedan glided to a stop in front of the Empire State Building, its engine humming low beneath the patter of lingering rain. Jordan Hayes sat motionless in the passenger seat, his hand still resting over the soaked leather portfolio that now felt heavier than ever. Through the streaked window, the marble steps of the building gleamed faintly under the overcast sky, reflecting the soft glow of the lobby lights beyond the towering glass doors. People hurried inside their dry coats, pristine umbrellas, neatly folded shoes clicking across the polished floor as if they belonged to a different world entirely. For Jordan, every detail of the moment was a reminder he did not look like them. His reflection in the glass told the truth plainly. His once pressed suit was wrinkled, his shirt plastered to his back, his tie twisted and limp beneath the lapels of his jacket. His hair was flattened by the rain, his shoes soaked through to his socks. He looked less like a young professional on the cusp of a career, and more like a stranger washed up from a storm. He swallowed hard, trying to steady the knot in his chest. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. He had pictured himself walking in with confidence, each detail of his appearance, flawless, shaking hands firmly, and proving to everyone in that building that he deserved to be there. Instead, every step forward felt like a battle against shame and circumstance. Beside him, the older man whose name Jordan still didn't know watched quietly. His blue eyes, still sharp beneath his damp hair, lingered on Jordan with a calm that was neither pity nor judgment. "You sure you want to go in there like this?" he asked softly, his voice, even the kind that didn't need to be raised to command attention. "They won't care about the rain, son. They'll only see what they want to see." Jordan forced a faint, humorless smile, gripping the portfolio tighter. "If I don't try, I'll never forgive myself. I have to walk in there no matter how they look at me." The older man nodded, his expression unreadable, and said nothing more. As Jordan opened the door, the last remnants of the rain greeted him with a cold slap to the face. The storm had slowed but hadn't truly passed. Puddles still pooled along the curb, reflecting the towering facade of the Empire State like fractured glass. Each step he took toward the entrance squelched loudly the soaked leather of his shoes, groaning in protest. Inside, the world changed. The lobby was warm, silent, and impossibly pristine. The marble floors gleamed beneath the soft, indirect lighting. The air carried a faint, expensive scent of fresh flowers and polished wood. Abstract sculptures rose like silent sentinels along the corridor, each one a subtle reminder that this was not a place for the ordinary. Jordan hesitated just past the glass doors, aware of every drop of water dripping from his coat onto the floor, every eye that turned briefly to glance at the soaked stranger disturbing the immaculate calm. A man in a tailored navy coat shot him a glance, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes betraying the faintest flicker of disdain. A receptionist whispered something to her colleague, their lips curving into a quick, polite smirk, before vanishing behind the masks of professionalism. Jordan ignored it all because he had to. Every piece of pride he had left was now wrapped around the simple fact that he was still here. He had survived South Harlem, he had survived the storm, and even if this building spat him back out, he wouldn't let himself leave without trying. At the security desk, a tall guard in a blazer tapped on a sleek tablet, his gaze flicking up as Jordan approached. His expression didn't change, but his posture straightened subtly as if bracing himself for a problem. "Good morning," Jordan began, forcing his voice steady. "My name's Jordan Hayes. I have a 9 o'clock interview with the finance division." The guard's eyes scanned him, once taking in the soaked clothes, the water-streaked portfolio, before he turned back to his tablet. The silence stretched out long enough for Jordan's pulse to quicken, each passing second pounding in his ears. Finally, the guard spoke, his voice clipped but not unkind. "Yes, Mr. Hayes, 14th floor finance division. But I should tell you," his eyes lifted steady but impassive, "they're strict about timing." Jordan nodded, his jaw tightening. "I understand," He didn't bother explaining not to this man, not when the words would sound like excuses. Storms, flat tires, a morning spent helping a stranger, none of it mattered here. Only the clock mattered. He crossed the vast expanse of marble, every soggy step echoing in the cavernous space, each one sounding louder than it should have. His reflection stared back at him in the mirrored elevator doors, the image of someone who looked like he had already lost before he'd begun. The ride up was too quick, too silent, giving him no time to compose himself, no time to adjust the weight pressing down on his shoulders. When the doors opened onto the 14th floor, the air felt even thinner. Dark hardwood floors stretched beneath his feet, frosted glass partitions lined with framed cityscape photographs dividing the space. A receptionist in a sleek gray blazer sat behind a curved desk, her fingers flying across her keyboard, until she looked up and saw him. For just a moment, her carefully composed face flickered surprise, then sympathy, before she smoothed it over with professionalism. "Good morning." Jordan began clearing his throat and adjusting his grip on the damp portfolio. "I had a 9 o'clock interview with Mr. Callahan." She glanced at the clock on the wall behind her, 9:18. Her eyes softened slightly, but her posture remained firm. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes," she said gently, her voice low but unwavering. "That interview has already moved on to the next candidate. Mr. Callahan's schedule is very tight." Jordan's stomach twisted, the words landing like a physical blow. He had known deep down this was coming, but hearing it aloud, feeling the finality in her tone, turned that sinking dread into something heavier, sharper. He opened his mouth, struggling to keep his composure. I know I'm late. There was a storm and an elderly man stranded with a flat tire. I couldn't just—" He stopped himself. The words felt pointless now, an echo of something no one here would care to understand. The receptionist's eyes flicked to the portfolio in his hand. She extended a hand gently. "May I—" He hesitated, then handed her one of the few resumes that had survived the storm. Its edges warped, the ink slightly smudged but still legible. She nodded, her expression softening for the briefest moment. "I'll make sure Mr. Callahan gets this." For a fleeting second, their eyes met hers, calm and understanding his raw with quiet defeat. Then the moment passed. Jordan turned toward the elevator, each step heavy, his shoulders sagging beneath the weight of the morning. The elevator doors closed behind him with a soft chime, sealing off the world he had fought so hard to enter. Back in the pristine lobby, sunlight had begun to pierce the thinning clouds outside, casting long, pale streaks across the marble. The world beyond the glass carried on cars, honking people, hurrying by their lives untouched by the storm of someone else's day. Jordan didn't rage. He didn't cry. He simply walked out into the damp air, the disappointment clinging to him as tangibly as his soaked clothes, his dreams trailing quietly behind him like the rain still dripping from his jacket. The pale morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Jordan Hayes's modest apartment in Harlem, streaking across the peeling paint and the battered kitchen table where he sat hunched over his laptop. The hum of the radiator filled the silence, a faint soundtrack to the gnawing weight pressing against his chest. The glow of the screen in front of him offered no comfort. His resume stared back, its bold lines and neatly formatted bullet points a reminder of everything he had worked for, and in the span of one storm and one morning watched slip through his fingers. His leather portfolio, still warped and scarred from the rain, lay on the table beside him like a relic of failure. The faint water stains on its edges caught the weak light as if mocking him. The suit jacket he had worn yesterday hung on a rusty nail by the window, still carrying the faint outline of water damage that no cleaner could truly erase. To anyone else, they were just things, but to Jordan, they felt like scars. Physical proof of the day he'd done the right thing and paid the price for it. His phone buzzed, breaking the heavy quiet. The name flashing on the screen made his chest tighten. Mom. Her voice had been the one steady tether in his life, and he hadn't yet told her what had happened. She had been so proud when he got the interview, even mailed him his grandfather's old cufflinks, the silver dulled by time but polished for this one shot at a future she believed he deserved. He hesitated, a thumb hovering over the green icon, then swiped to answer. "Baby, I've been thinking about you all morning." Her voice flowed through the line, soft and warm, the kind of voice that could cut through the darkest clouds. "Any news? Did you hear back from that big company yet?" Jordan opened his mouth, the truth rising bitter in his throat, but the words stuck there. How could he explain that he had made it all the way downtown, that he had fought through a storm, sacrificed everything to help someone else, and still ended up standing in the marble lobby of the Empire State, soaking wet, only to be dismissed like a late busboy? Before he could find the words, another call flashed across the top of the screen. Unknown number, New York area code. His brow furrowed. "Ma, I've got to take this. Could be about a job." "Of course, baby. Go get him," she said softly. No questions asked. He switched lines, nerves coiling tight in his chest as he pressed the phone to his ear. "Hello, this is Jordan Hayes." "Mr. Hayes." A woman's voice answered, calm and deliberate, carrying the smooth precision of someone used to speaking for people far more powerful. "This is Diane Caldwell, executive assistant to Mr. Charles Kensington. I'm calling on his behalf to invite you to a private meeting this afternoon at 2 o'clock if you're available." Jordan froze. The world seemed to tilt slightly beneath him, his free hand gripping the edge of the table as though to steady himself. "I'm sorry. Did you say Mr. Charles Kensington? As in the CEO?" His voice faltered, disbelief creeping in despite himself. "Yes, sir," Diane replied without missing a beat. "Mr. Kensington personally asked to meet with you. The meeting will be on the 85th floor of the Empire State Building. Would you like me to send car service, or will you arrange your own transportation?" For a moment, Jordan could hear nothing but the hum of his old apartment and the pounding of his heartbeat in his ears. The words felt surreal, like a lifeline being extended from a world he had been shut out of only hours ago. "No, I can get there. I know the way. Excellent. We look forward to seeing you, Mr. Hayes." Diane said, her voice as smooth as it had begun before the line clicked dead. Jordan stared at the phone in his hand, the silence in his apartment suddenly deafening. This couldn't be real. There had to be some mistake. Charles Kensington wasn't just any CEO. He was the kind of man whose name turned boardrooms quiet, whose decisions reshaped entire industries. Why would someone like that want to see him? And yet, there had been no hint of mistake in Diane's voice. Only certainty. He shot up from his chair, nearly knocking over the chipped coffee mug beside him. His suit, still faintly wrinkled from yesterday's storm, was pulled from the nail. He worked quickly, pressing the jacket as best he could, polishing his shoes until the leather caught the dim light despite the faint scars left behind by the downpour. He clipped his grandfather's cufflinks into place, the small silver pieces clicking softly like a promise that despite everything he wasn't done yet. By 15:15, a yellow cab rolled up outside his building. The storm clouds were long gone, replaced by a sky so blue and clear it felt like the city itself was offering a fresh start. The streets still bore the damp memory of yesterday's chaos, but sunlight glinted off the puddles, turning them into mirrors, reflecting the towering skyline ahead. As the cab sped toward Midtown, Jordan sat quietly in the back, his hands folded over the portfolio, his pulse steadying. He wasn't running this time. He wasn't begging for a chance. He was being summoned. When the cab finally pulled up to the Empire State again, it didn't feel like the same building that had swallowed his hope the day before. The marble steps still gleamed, the golden light still spilled across the polished lobby, but the air felt different. It wasn't the building chasing him anymore. He was walking toward it, not as an intruder, but as someone expected. Inside, the same security guard from yesterday barely glanced up before scanning his name, handing over a black access badge etched with the Kensington Group emblem. 85th floor, the guard said flatly, his tone no longer holding the quiet skepticism it had yesterday. As the elevator doors slid shut, Jordan caught his reflection once more, but this time it felt different. He still carried the scars of yesterday, faint creases in the jacket, subtle scuffs on the shoes, but his eyes, steady and unflinching, looked like someone no storm could break. As the elevator climbed, each soft chime felt less like a countdown, and more like the rhythm of something long overdue. When the doors finally opened to the 85th floor, the world beyond was everything the lobby below pretended to be: quiet, opulent, and commanding. Floor-to-ceiling windows poured sunlight across dark wood and steel art and furniture, so understated it whispered of wealth and power. A woman in a navy suit approached with practiced grace. "Mr. Hayes, I'm Diane Caldwell. Mr. Kensington will see you shortly. May I get you anything while you wait?" Jordan shook his head, his hand tightening over the portfolio. "No, thank you. I'm ready." For the first time since yesterday morning, he meant it. The tall double doors opened without a sound, revealing an office that felt less like a workplace and more like a quiet dominion suspended above New York City. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed a sweeping view of Manhattan where the late afternoon sun painted the skyline in molten gold. The air was still the kind of stillness that suggested power not loud or brash, but absolute, patient, and deliberate. At the far end of the room, a high-backed leather chair faced the windows, the silhouette of a man outlined by the glow of the descending sun. "Mr. Hayes," a voice called deep and measured as the chair slowly turned. Jordan froze. The face that came into view was familiar silver hair, neatly combed back, sharp eyes, set in a face lined not just with age, but with quiet authority. Recognition struck him like a thunderclap. It was the man from the street, the one fumbling with a jack beneath the black sedan, drenched and struggling against the storm. But here in this space he looked entirely different. No longer weary and weather-beaten, but composed, confident, exuding a calm gravity that needed no announcement. Charles Kensington rose from his chair with an ease that spoke of a lifetime of commanding rooms. "Good to see you again," he said, simply extending his hand. Jordan stepped forward, his grip firm, despite the swirl of disbelief and tension tightening in his chest. I didn't realize," he said, his voice low, uncertain, "that I was the man stranded on the corner yesterday." Kensington's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "That's precisely the point." Jordan's brow furrowed, confusion and curiosity colliding. "I don't understand. You knew I had an interview. You knew I was late because I stopped to help you. Why am I here now?" Kensington gestured toward a pair of leather chairs opposite his desk. "Sit, Jordan. There's something you need to hear before I answer that." Jordan eased into the chair, his hands resting on the worn leather portfolio in his lap. Kensington, rather than sitting, moved toward the windows, his hands clasped loosely behind his back as he gazed out at the city below. 50 years ago, Kensington began, his voice carrying the weight of memory. I was 22, standing outside a steel mill in Pittsburgh. Cheap suit, nervous, out of my depth. I asked a man 3 times my age to believe in me, to take a risk no sane businessman would. And for reasons I still don't fully understand, he said yes. That one decision changed the course of my life. Everything you see here, this office, this company, it doesn't exist without that moment. He turned his eyes, meeting Jordan's sharp but not unkind. Yesterday, I watched you face a moment most people would have walked past. Wet, cold, late, for something that could have changed your future, and still you stopped. You helped not because anyone was watching, not because there was a reward waiting, but because it was the right thing to do. Jordan swallowed hard, his throat tight. The memory of the storm, the aching frustration as he watched the taxi drive away, the sting of being turned away at the Empire State, all of it flooded back. I lost everything. Because of that, he admitted, softly, almost more to himself than to Kensington. The older man's expression softened the corners of his eyes, creasing with something that looked almost like pride. Did you prove something more valuable than a single interview slot I can teach anyone to analyze numbers, to build a portfolio, to read a balance sheet? But I can't teach character. I can't teach someone to act with integrity when no one is watching. That Jordan is why you're here. Kensington returned to his desk and pulled open a drawer. From it, he retrieved a familiar object, Jordan's portfolio. Its leather still warped its pages, slightly curled from the storm. He set it on the desk, sliding it toward him. I read through this after you left it in my car. Your analysis on emerging markets is sharp. Your cover letter is honest, refreshingly so, but none of that is why you'll be working here. Jordan's head snapped up, his breath catching. Working here. The words came out as a whisper, equal parts disbelief and hope. I'm not offering you the entry-level analyst position you came for. Kensington said, his tone calm but firm. I'm offering you a role as my special assistant. You'll sit in rooms most people spend a decade clawing their way toward. You'll listen, you'll learn, and you'll be tested in ways no textbook could prepare you for. It won't be easy, and it won't always be comfortable. But if you prove yourself, you won't just have a job, you'll have a foundation to build something far greater. For a long moment, Jordan sat frozen, the weight of the offer settling into his chest. It felt unreal, like the world had tilted overnight, turning what had been the lowest day of his life into a chance few ever received. His voice, when it finally came, was unsteady but resolute. Why me? You don't even know me. Kensington smiled, a small measured smile, born of understanding. Because someone once believed in me before I deserved it. And it changed everything. He extended his hand once more, steady and deliberate. Jordan looked at it. That met Kensington's gaze, seeing not just a CEO, but the man who had stood on the wet pavement yesterday. A man who understood the weight of chances and the value of character. Slowly, Jordan reached out, his grip firm, not as the desperate young man scrambling through a storm, but as someone who had been seen chosen and given a path forward. For the first time in his life, Jordan Hayes walked toward his future, not as someone hoping to be let in, but as someone who had earned his place. As Jordan Hayes left Charles Kensington's office that evening, the fading light of New York City stretched across the skyline, bathing the streets below in a warm golden glow. Only 24 hours earlier, he had trudged through the rain-soaked streets of Harlem, his cheap navy suit plastered to his skin, clutching a battered portfolio that felt more like a lifeline than a folder. He had been on his way to the most important interview of his young life, determined to prove to the towering skyscrapers of Manhattan that a kid from a cramped apartment with no connections, no legacy, and nothing but determination could belong in their polished world. But life, as it often does, had thrown him a test he didn't see coming. The flat tire, the elderly man struggling in the storm, the inner voice urging him to walk past so he wouldn't lose the one shot he had worked so hard for. Jordan had felt all of it. The gnawing fear, the hesitation. And yet, despite knowing the risk, he knelt down on the wet asphalt, rolled up his sleeves, and helped. Because deep down, even at 22, Jordan knew that some choices define us far more than any title, paycheck, or polished lobby ever could. When he arrived late at the Empire State Building, Soaked, dismissed, and carrying the sting of failure in every step, Jordan felt the crushing weight of the world on his shoulders. It was more than just a missed interview. It felt like confirmation of what so many doubters had implied his whole life, that no matter how hard he worked, the doors of power would always remain just out of reach for someone like him. Yet, what he couldn't see at the time was that the very act that had cost him his chance had also opened a much greater one. The old man he had helped wasn't just another stranded driver. He was Charles Kensington, a man whose signature had built entire industries and whose belief had the power to change lives. And Kensington had seen something in Jordan, not just skill, but heart integrity, and the kind of character that can't be bought or taught. In a single conversation, what felt like the worst day of Jordan's life became the first step toward a future he had only dared to imagine. Not as an entry-level employee fighting for scraps, but as someone Kensington would personally mentor, someone trusted to sit at tables most spend years clawing their way toward. A door had closed, but another far greater had opened because Jordan stayed true to the values his mother and his late grandfather had instilled in him. You don't help people when it's easy, you help them because it's right. The lesson in Jordan's story is one we can all carry into our lives. Opportunities don't always come wrapped in shiny packages. Sometimes they come disguised as storm setbacks and impossible choices. And sometimes the very moment you fear will break you is the one that reveals who you truly are and who is watching when you least expect it. Character integrity and compassion are currencies far more valuable than any resume or reference. They are what open doors that no amount of credentials alone ever could. So, when life tests you, when the easy choice tempts you to turn away from someone in need or to compromise what you know is right, remember Jordan Hayes. Remember that doing good, even when it costs you something, might be the very thing that changes everything. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that the smallest decisions can lead to life-changing moments, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories of resilience, unexpected miracles, and people who remind us all that hope, kindness, and courage still matter. Every click helps us keep these stories alive, and who knows, the next one might just change how you see your own life.